My name is Vesictor, and I was the one who read the prophecy aloud the day it came true. I want that on record before I say anything else. Not because I'm proud of it, because I've spent 9 cycles trying to explain to my own people what I saw, and every time I tell it, someone new decides I've gone soft in the skull. So this is the last time. I'll tell it plain, the way it happened, and you can believe me or not. I was an archivist then, 3rd tier, which meant I dusted things and reshelved crystals, and wasn't allowed to touch the sealed vault without a senior standing over my shoulder. My hands are long and thin, the way most of my kinds are, and I used to be embarrassed by them. Now I think they were made for exactly one thing, and that was to hold the tablet the morning the sky changed. The station was called Harrow's Deep. You won't find it on charts anymore. It sat at the edge of the Meridian Belt, an old mining anchor that got converted into a records depository about 200 cycles before I was born. Cold place. The kind of cold that lives in the metal and never leaves, so you always keep your outer skin drawn tight and your breathing slow. The lights were amber, always amber, because someone a long time ago decided amber was easier on the eyes during the long dark, and nobody had bothered to change it since. I remember the sound of that place better than anything. A low hum from the atmosphere recyclers, a tick every 11 seconds from the coolant lines, and under all of it, if you stood very still in the deep stacks, you could hear the station breathe, a slow expansion and contraction as it warmed and cooled with the rotation. Old stations do that. New ones are silent. I've always trusted the ones that make noise. There were 40 of us aboard. Archivists, a handful of technicians, 1 medical officer who mostly slept, and the warden, an old female named Gret's son who had run the deep for longer than most of us had been alive. She had a face like cracked stone, and a way of looking at you that made you check whether you'd done something wrong even when you hadn't. I was terrified of her. Everyone was. Looking back, I think that fear was the closest thing to love the young ones on that station were capable of. The prophecy I mentioned wasn't secret. That surprises people. They imagine it locked away, guarded, whispered about. No, it was cataloged. Entry 994 in the sealed devotional series, a set of tablets we'd inherited from a dead faith whose name nobody could pronounce anymore. Most of the devotional series was nonsense. Star worship, blood counting, the usual things frightened species carve into stone when they don't understand the dark yet. We kept them because we kept everything. That was the whole point of the deep. We didn't judge what was worth remembering. We just remembered. But entry 994 was different, and every archivist knew it, and none of us liked to talk about it. It was a single tablet, black glass, older than the station by an order I couldn't calculate, and the text on it wasn't in the dead faith's language. It was in 12 languages, all of them, layered over each other like the writer wanted to be absolutely certain that whoever found it could read it. That alone should have frightened us more than it did. Because you don't write something in 12 tongues unless you're desperate to be understood across a very long time. I'd read it maybe 100 times. We all had. It went like this, more or less. Translations argue over the small words, but the bones of it are these. When the belt runs red and the old lights fail, look not to the strong. The strong will already be running. Look instead to the small ones, the loud ones, the ones who bury their dead and weep and rise again. Ancient prophecies spoke of one force that would not break when all breaking was upon it. Not the wise, not the mighty, the stubborn. And they will come not to conquer you but to stand in front of you, which is the harder thing, and the thing you will not understand until it is done. We used to laugh at it, gently, the way you laugh at an old relative who says something strange, the stubborn. What kind of prophecy pins the fate of the galaxy on stubbornness? We had empires built on wisdom. We had fleets built on might. We had the conquered itself, that great machine of alliance and law that held the civilized dark together. And this cracked black tablet said none of it would matter. Only the small, loud ones. Only the ones who wept and rose. I didn't believe it. Understand that. On the morning the sky changed, Vesictor did not believe a word of entry 994. I was reciting it as a joke. Let me tell you how it started, because the beginning matters, and everyone always wants to skip to the end. It started with the belt running red. I was in the deep stacks doing inventory when the amber light stuttered, just once. A flicker, the kind you feel more than see. I stopped, held still, waited for the hum of the recyclers to steady. It didn't. It dropped in pitch, a long, sick groan like the station was clearing its throat, and then a new light came up behind the amber, a red light. It came from nowhere I could point to, from the walls themselves it seemed, and it turned all our familiar shadows into something I didn't recognize. The comm crackled, Warden Sun's voice flat as ever. All personnel to the central well, now. I ran. We all ran. When you've spent your whole life fearing a female's voice, you don't make her ask twice. The central well was the old mining shaft, capped with a viewing dome, the one indulgence the deep allowed itself. 40 of us gathered under that dome and looked up, and I will never forget what I saw. The meridian belt, that great river of stars and dust we'd all grown up looking at, cold and blue and eternal, was red. Bleeding red from one horizon of the dome to the other. Not the whole belt. A wound in it. A spreading stain like something enormous had opened a vein in the sky. Nobody spoke. 40 of us, and the only sound was the station breathing. Then Gret's son said very quietly, "It's the Sarn." I didn't know the word. Most of us didn't. She saw that on our faces and her jaw tightened. "Before your time," she said. "Before mine, mostly. There are things the conquered doesn't put in the general record. There are things we keep here in the deep precisely so they can be forgotten by everyone except us." She looked up at the red stain. "The Sarn came once before, a long time ago. They eat light, not metaphorically. They consume ordered energy, stars, reactors, mines. It makes no difference to them. Wherever they pass, the dark stops being empty and starts being hungry. The old faiths that we archive, the dead ones, most of them are dead because the Sarn found them. We are the librarians of the eaten." I remember my legs feeling very far away. "They were driven off," she went on, "once. At terrible cost by an alliance that no longer exists. And everything we know about that, every account, every warning is here. In our vault. Which is why, of all the stations in the belt, the Sarn will come here first." Someone made a sound. A young technician named Pell, I think. A small broken sound like a child. Gret's son turned from the dome and faced us, and her cracked stone face was the calmest thing in that red-lit room. "We are archivists," she said. "We are not soldiers. We have no fleet. The nearest conquered garrison is 9 days out and will not come because they cannot spare ships to defend a library. So I am not going to lie to you. Do you understand? I am too old to lie to you. We are, in all likelihood, going to die here, and the things we protect are going to be eaten, and the galaxy will be poorer and dumber for it, and will not even know what it lost. I want you to understand what kind of thing it was to hear a superior say that. In our culture, you do not admit fear. You do not admit doubt. You certainly do not tell your subordinates they are going to die. The strength of a leader is measured in how completely they hide the truth. And here was the most feared female I'd ever known, standing in red light, handing us the truth like it was the only gift she had left to give. I loved her in that moment more than I'd ever loved anything. I've thought about why many times since. I think it's because the lie would have been for her comfort and the truth was for ours. She chose ours. "However," she said, and something in the room shifted. "There is one more thing in the record, one more account of the last Sarn war that I have never shown anyone because I did not believe it and because it reads like a fever dream. But we are in a fever dream now, so." She looked at me, directly at me. "Archivist Tor, entry 994, recite it." My throat closed. "Warden, that's the devotional nonsense, the—" "Recite it." So I did. In front of 40 terrified people under a bleeding sky, I recited the words I'd always thought were a joke. "When the belt runs red and the old lights fail, look not to the strong." My voice shook. The strong will already be running. And I heard for the first time how the prophecy wasn't describing some distant hypothetical. It was describing us. The belt was red. The old lights had failed. And somewhere out there, I had no doubt, the strong were already running. When I finished, The well was silent for a long time. "Account I never showed you," Gret's son said finally, "was written by the last survivor of the last Sarn war, a member of the alliance that drove them off. And in it that survivor names the one force that held the line when everything else broke. The one force the prophecy points to." She paused. "It was a species so young, so small, so new to the dark that the great powers of that age had barely bothered to chart them. They came from a single blue world. They had no empire. They had barely any ships. And the survivor writes that when the Sarn came, every wise and mighty power in the alliance calculated the odds and withdrew to defend their own borders. Every one, except them." "What were they called?" Pell asked in that small broken voice. Gret's son looked up at the red stain in the sky. "Human," she said. "They called themselves human, and the record says they are still out there, diminished, scattered, half forgotten, but out there." She was quiet a moment. "I have already sent the distress call to the conquered which will not answer, and on a very old frequency I found in that very old account, a frequency I have no reason to believe still works to them." I did not sleep, that first sleep cycle. None of us did. We sat under the dome and watched the wound in the sky grow, and we waited to see if anything at all would answer an old female's call into the dark. Something did. It came on the second cycle, when the red stain had swollen to cover a third of the dome, and the temperature aboard the deep had begun, inexplicably, to drop. "The Sarn's approach," Gret said, "the hunger reaching ahead of them, thinning the ordered energy of our own reactor. We were rationing heat. We wore our outer skins drawn so tight we could barely move. And into that cold and that fear came a single transmission, weak and cracked with distance. On the old frequency, nobody had believed still worked. It was a voice, flat, tired, and using trade tongue with an accent none of us had ever heard. "Harrow's Deep, this is the freighter Ostrich. We received an old signal, real old. Had to dig out a code book my grandmother kept. Say again your situation. And say it slow because I'm going to need to sit down for this one." I was the one who answered. Gret put her long hand on my shoulder and said, "You read the prophecy, you talked to them." And so I did. I told the tired voice everything. The Sarn, the wound in the sky, the 9 days to the nearest garrison, the garrison that would not come, the vault full of the memory of everything the Sarn had ever eaten. I told it we were 40 archivists with no weapons and no fleet, and that we were going to die, and that our warden had called into the dark on the strength of an old account and an older prophecy. And I told the voice, my own voice breaking, that I hadn't believed a word of that prophecy until this exact moment. The transmission was quiet for a while, long enough that I thought we'd lost it. Then the tired voice said, "Yeah, okay, hang on." And there was a sound in the background, muffled, like the speaker had turned away from the comm, and I heard that human voice call out to someone else, somewhere in that distant ship, and what it said was, "Get everybody up. Get Mara on the long range. Tell the others it's the old one. It's the thing our great-grandparents made us promise." A pause. "The library's calling, and there's something coming to eat it." I didn't understand then what any of that meant. I do now. I'll explain it in time. But I want to stop here on that sound. On a tired voice in a distant ship, turning away from the comm to wake its crew. Because everything that came after, everything I saw, the thing I still can't fully explain, the reason I've spent 9 cycles being called a soft skull, all of it flows from that one small human sentence. The thing our great-grandparents made us promise. They'd been waiting. That's what I didn't understand yet. Across all those cycles, diminished and scattered and half forgotten, the humans had kept a promise nobody had asked them to keep, on the chance that one day an old library at the edge of the dark would send up a call. They'd kept the codebooks. They'd kept the frequency. They'd told their children and their children's children, if this signal ever comes, you go. We'll get to why. We'll get to what they lost the first time that made them keep that promise so fiercely. For now, know only this. The wound in the sky kept spreading. The cold kept deepening. Warden Gret's son gathered her 40 frightened archivists under the dome and told them the truth, which was that help might be coming, but that it was one freighter won against a thing that 8 stars. And I stood in the red light with the black tablet in my long, thin hands, and for the first time in my life, I stopped thinking of entry 994 as a joke. I started thinking of it as a warning we had been too proud to hear. The ostrich came out of the dark on the 4th cycle, and it was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. I mean that. I'd grown up on conquered vessels, smooth, silent, beautiful things that moved like they were ashamed to be seen. The ostrich was none of that. It was a freighter, a working hull, all bolted plates and welded scars, and a name painted on the side by hand, crooked, like whoever did it had been in a hurry and never got around to fixing it. One of its engines burned brighter than the other. It rattled coming in. I could see it rattle through the dome. And it was alone. I think that's the part that broke something in me. We'd let ourselves hope over 3 cycles of waiting that when the humans said tell the others, a fleet would come. Some hidden armada, some diminished but secret power. Instead, we got one ugly freighter with a hand-painted name and a mismatched pair of engines, limping in ahead of a wound in the sky that now covered half the dome. Pell said it out loud, what we were all thinking. That's it, that's the one force. Gret's son didn't answer. She was watching the freighter dock with an expression I couldn't read. The airlock cycled. We gathered in the receiving bay, all 40 of us, because nobody wanted to be alone anywhere on that station now, and we waited to meet the species from the old blue world, the ones the prophecy promised, and I don't know what I expected. Something towering, something armored, something that looked like it could stand in front of a thing that 8 stars. 6 of them walked out, 6. They were small, smaller than us, most of them, soft-skinned in a way that looked almost painful, no outer skin at all to draw tight against the cold, just cloth wrapped over that vulnerable flesh. Their faces were flat and strange and endlessly expressive. I'd never seen faces move so much, so fast, every thought written right there on the surface. One of them was old, older than Gret by the look of it, moving slow with a hand pressed to its lower back. One was very young, barely more than a child. And the one in front, the one whose tired voice I'd been speaking to for 3 cycles, was a female of middle years with gray coming into the fur on her head, and a look in her eyes like she'd already grieved for us and was here anyway. That was Mara, she was the captain. She looked around at 40 terrified archivists, and then up at the red wound bleeding across the dome above us, and she let out a long breath. "Okay," she said. "First thing, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that's it, 6 people and a busted freighter." She almost smiled. "Yeah, that's it. There aren't a lot of us left, friend. There haven't been for a long time, but you didn't call for a fleet. You called for us, so here's us." Gret stepped forward. The 2 old females regarded each other, and something passed between them that the rest of us weren't part of, the recognition of 2 people who had spent their lives carrying weight and were both very tired. "You understand what's coming," Gret said. It wasn't a question. "I understand better than you do," Mara said quietly. "That's why we kept the promise." And then she told us. Standing in that cold receiving bay, with the Sarn drawing closer by the hour, Mara told us why the humans came. The last time the Sarn had swept the dark, the war in the old account, the one Gret had never shown us, the humans hadn't been the heroes of the story. Not at the start. At the start they'd been exactly what everyone assumed, small, young, unimportant. When the Sarn came and the great powers ran, the humans hadn't stayed out of some grand nobility. They'd stayed because they had nowhere to run to. One blue world. That was all they had. You don't withdraw to defend your borders when your border is a single planet, and the thing that eats stars is coming straight for it. So they'd stood, not because they were brave, because they were cornered, and they'd learned in the standing something the wise and mighty powers had forgotten in all their running, that the Sarn could be fought. Not beaten easily, not beaten cleanly, but fought. The hunger that ate ordered energy could be starved, could be baited, could be turned on itself if you were willing to pay a price the calculating powers had already decided was too high. We paid it, Mara said. You want to know how many of us there used to be? Before the Sarn, she was quiet a moment. We don't even have a number anymore. The record's gone. Everyone who could have counted is dead. We drove the Sarn off and it cost us so much that we've spent every generation since just trying to still exist. We're not a power. We're the survivors of being a power. There's a difference, and the difference is most of us. Nobody in the bay moved. But before the last of the old ones died, Mara went on, they made us promise something, because they knew the Sarn weren't gone, just full, just sleeping. And they knew that somewhere out there was a library, this library that held the only complete memory of what the Sarn are and how they're fought. And they knew that when the Sarn woke up hungry again, they'd come for that memory first, to eat it, so that nobody could ever fight them the way we did. She looked at Gret. The old ones made us promise that if the library ever called, we'd answer, even if it was just 6 of us in a busted freighter, because the memory in your vault is worth more than the 6 of us. It's worth more than all of us that are left. If the galaxy loses what you're keeping down there, then everything we paid for nothing. I understood then, the sentence I hadn't understood on the comm. The thing our great-grandparents made us promise. They hadn't come to save us. Not really. 40 archivists weren't worth the risk to a species with so few left. They'd come to save what we kept. And in doing that, in standing in front of our vault, they were going to have to stand in front of us too. That was the harder thing. That was the thing the prophecy said we wouldn't understand until it was done. They will come not to conquer you, but to stand in front of you. I looked at those 6 small, soft-skinned people, and I finally understood what the black tablet had been trying to tell 12 dead languages across an unimaginable gulf of time. The one force wasn't the mightiest. It was the one that would stand when standing was pointless. That would answer a promise that cost more than it could pay. That would come, 6 against the dark, because 100 generations ago some dying old ones had said you go. Mara clapped her small, soft hands together, and the sound made all of us jump. Right, she said. We've got maybe 2 cycles before it gets here. Show me your reactor, show me your vault, and somebody get my grandmother a chair, her back's killing her. The old human, her grandmother, apparently, the one with the hand pressed to her spine, snorted a laugh, and it was such an ordinary sound, such a small human sound in the middle of all that terror, that I felt something in my chest come loose. What they did over the next 2 cycles I could not fully follow. I'm an archivist. I dust crystals. But I watched, and I'll tell you what I saw, because the watching is the thing I've spent 9 cycles trying to make my own people believe. The humans didn't try to build a weapon. That's what we expected, some device, some clever machine to fight a thing that ate stars. They didn't. Instead, they went into our reactor core and they made it sick. Deliberately. Mara and the young one and the technician among them spent a full cycle destabilizing our own power source, tuning it, they said, to a frequency that would taste to the Sarn like the most ordered, most beautiful energy in the whole belt. Bait. They were turning the entire station into a lure. The Sarn can't help itself, Mara explained when she saw my face. It's hungry, it's always hungry. You dangle ordered energy in front of it, tuned just right, and it comes straight for it, ignores everything else, ignores your vault, ignores you if you're quiet and cold and boring enough. She wiped grease off her hands. We turn your reactor into the best meal in the sector. It comes for the meal, and then she stopped. And then what? I asked. She didn't answer right away. The young human, the child, answered for her in a small voice. And then the reactor eats it, the child said. When it's mid-swallow, Grandma showed us how. It's what our people did the first time. You let it start to feed, and right when it's most open, you overload the core into it. The ordered energy it's swallowing becomes the thing that kills it. It chokes on the meal. The child looked at the floor. But you have to be close. Somebody has to be at the core to time it. Automatic doesn't work. The Sarn feels a machine coming and pulls back. It has to be a person. A person who waits until the last second when it's really committed, and then the child stopped too. I looked from the child to Mara to the old grandmother in her chair, and I understood the price. Somebody had to stay at the core. Somebody had to stand there and wait, with the thing that ate stars leaning in to feed, and hold their nerve until the last possible instant, and then die in the overload with it. That was why 6 had come, not because 6 was all they could spare. Because you only needed one to stay. The other 5 were there to make sure the one who stayed didn't have to do it alone until the very end. I have to be careful here telling this part, because I've told it wrong before, made it grander than it was, and every time I do, I lose the truth of it. So let me tell it small. Let me tell it the way it happened. The Sarn came on the 7th cycle. I won't describe it the way the old accounts do, all cosmic horror and unnameable geometry. What I saw through the dome was simpler and worse. The wound in the sky stopped spreading and started pulling in, contracting, gathering itself toward a single point, toward us, toward the 6-suite reactor the humans had made of our home. The temperature aboard the deep dropped so fast that ice formed on the inside of the dome. The lights, both the amber and the red, guttered like candles, and the station stopped breathing. That old familiar sound I'd trusted my whole life, the slow expansion and contraction, just stopped. The Sarn was already eating the ordered energy around us, already at the door. We evacuated to the ostrich. 39 archivists and 5 humans, crammed into that ugly, rattling freighter, ready to run the instant the trap was sprung. The one who stayed was Mara. Of course it was. I knew it would be the moment I understood the price. Not the grandmother, too frail to hold her nerve to the last second. Not the child. Not the technicians who'd be needed to fly the ostrich clear. The captain. The tired voice that had answered an old signal because her great-grandparents made her promise. She stayed at our reactor core, alone in the cold and the dark, with the thing that ate stars leaning in to feed. She let us say goodbye over the comm. That was the kind of person she was, even then. "Don't make it weird," she said, and I could hear the smile in her tired voice. "I've been driving that freighter for 30 years. My back's shot, my grandmother nags me. This is honestly not the worst way to go." A pause. "Take care of the library, that's all, that's the whole thing. You keep what you keep and you make sure somebody remembers this happened, so the next time, and there's always a next time, the next people know it can be done." Another pause, softer. "Vesic, you still there, archivist? The one who read the prophecy?" "I'm here," I said. My voice didn't work right. "You didn't believe it," she said. "The prophecy. You told me on the comm first thing, you said you never believed a word of it." "I believe it now." "Don't," she said. "Don't believe the prophecy. That's the mistake everyone makes. They think it was fate. They think we were the chosen force written in stone before time." I heard her breathe. "We weren't chosen, friend, we just showed up. That's the whole secret. There's no magic to it. Anybody could have kept the promise. We just did." A last pause. "So next time it's somebody's library and somebody's dark, you show up. That's the prophecy. That's all it ever was. Now go, it's here." The trap worked. I won't pretend I understood the physics of it. I saw the flash through the aft port of the ostrich as we ran, a light so ordered, so pure, so beautiful that even I could feel why the hungry dark could not resist it, and I saw the wound in the sky lunge for it, all that contracting hunger pouring down into our poor sick reactor in one greedy swallow. And I saw the swallow become the overload. I saw the meal become the thing that killed it. A silent white blossom where Harrow's deep had been, and where Mara had been, and the wound in the sky came apart around it, unmade, scattered, starved on the last mouthful it would ever take. The deep was gone, everything in the vault gone. Except it wasn't. That's the thing. That's what I have to make my people understand. Gret's son, old and feared and truthful, had spent those 7 cycles doing the one thing archivists are for, while the humans made the station sick. She and 39 of us had copied the vault, every crystal, every tablet, every account of every eaten faith, every warning, every method, the memory of the Sarn and how they're fought. We couldn't save the deep, but we saved what the deep was for. It's aboard the ostrich now. It's aboard 100 ships now because we've spent 9 cycles making copies, spreading it, seeding it across the dark so that it can never again be eaten in a single swallow. The humans took the grandmother home to their blue world. The child too. The others scattered the way humans do. I've lost track of most of them, but I kept the frequency. The old one, Mara's frequency. And I've told the story to anyone who will listen, and I've been called a soft skull for it, because my people don't want to believe that the one force the prophecy promised was 6 tired survivors in an ugly freighter who came because they'd made a promise and kept it. They want it to be fate. They want it to be destiny, chosen ones, magic written in stone, because if it's fate, then it's not a thing they have to do themselves. But Mara told me the truth in her last minute, and I've carried it 9 cycles, and I'll carry it until the dark takes me too. We weren't chosen, we just showed up. I read the prophecy aloud the day it came true, and I got it wrong, the way everyone gets it wrong. The one force isn't the mightiest, it isn't the wisest, it isn't written in any stone. It's whoever answers the call. The belt is quiet now. The lights, wherever I find them, I keep amber. And every 11 seconds in the deep places, I still listen for the tick of coolant lines and the slow breath of an old station warming in the dark. And I remember that somewhere out there, on a single blue world, a species that should have died long ago is still keeping promises nobody asked them to keep. If the call ever comes for you, and there's always a next time, you'll know what to do. You show up. That's the whole prophecy. That's all it ever was.